Welcome to the Majestic Truth Podcast. Join us as we delve into the mysteries of the universe, explore the unexplained, and shed light on some of the most important events that have occurred and are occurring in our world today. Get ready to open your mind, expand your horizons, and discover the extraordinary. This is the Majestic Truth Podcast. And now your host, Michelle.
Welcome back, Truth Seekers, to another episode of the Majestic Truth Podcast, the show that explores the most intriguing mysteries and unexplained phenomena from our world and beyond. I'm your host, Michelle, and today we're delving deep into the mysterious events of October 1st, 1948, known as the Gorman Dogfight UFO incident. So we're going to jump right in here, and let me give you a brief event summary. The Gorman Dogfight incident stands out as one of the most perplexing and enigmatic UFO encounters in history. On that fateful night on October 1st, 1948, George F. Gorman, a World War II veteran and an experienced pilot, found himself in a surreal and harrowing aerial encounter. This would forever alter his perspective on the unknown. Let's set the stage. It was a clear and crisp evening over Fargo, North Dakota, when Gorman, a second lieutenant with the North Dakota Air National Guard, took to the skies. His mission was routine, a practice flight to maintain his flying proficiency. Little did he know that his routine flight would take him on a journey into the unknown. As Gorman ascended into the night sky, he noticed a strange, fast-moving light in the distance. Initially, he dismissed it as a lighted weather balloon or a military aircraft. However, the object's rapid acceleration and erratic maneuvers soon convinced him otherwise. Gorman radioed the control tower reporting his encounter with the mysterious object. The tower confirmed that there were no other aircraft in the vicinity. Alone in the night sky, Gorman engaged the object in a dogfight that would defy explanation. In his trusty P-51 Mustang, Gorman engaged in a breathtaking aerial duel with this unexplained object. Witnesses on the ground reported seeing the two objects, Gorman's plane and the unidentified craft, circling and darting through the sky at times, coming perilously close to collision. Gorman described the object as a small, bright light that seemed to respond intelligently to his every move. During this high-stakes aerial pursuit, Gorman experienced firsthand the capabilities of this mysterious craft. It outpaced and outmaneuvered him at every turn, displaying acceleration and agility beyond the capabilities of any known aircraft of the time. As Gorman's plane ran low on fuel and his nerves were stretched to the limit, the UFO vanished into the night, leaving him both exhilarated and perplexed. What had he encountered that night over Fargo, North Dakota? Could it be a secret military project, a misidentified natural phenomenon, or something truly extraterrestrial? The Gorman Dogfight UFO incident has baffled researchers, skeptics, and UFO enthusiasts for decades. Some skeptics argue that Gorman may have been chasing a lighted balloon or a meteorological phenomenon, but his description of the object's controlled movements and rapid acceleration remains difficult to explain. To this day, the incident remains unexplained and stands as a testament to the enduring mystery of UFO encounters. George F. Gorman's encounter with the unknown on that October night in 1948 left an indelible mark on him and the world of ufology. In 1949, the United States Air Force concluded that the object that caused the Gorman dogfight was a lighted weather balloon. And there you have it, listeners, the Gorman Dogfight of 1948, a case that continues to captivate our imaginations and fuel the search for answers about what lies beyond our earthly realm. All right, so there are some key factors of this case, and we're going to go over them right now. Key factor number 1. Air traffic controllers and another pilot and his passenger witnessed this dogfight. The chief of the control tower had followed the fantastic combat with binoculars. There were 2 men in the control tower who saw the whole thing, and so did 2 men in a Piper Cub plane flying some 500 feet below Gorman. So let's discuss the eyewitnesses here a bit. We have the interrogation reports from the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Intelligence Department for the witnesses. First, we have the fighter pilot, Lieutenant George Gorman. So this report is dated October 4th, 1948. Interrogation officer, Major Paul Kubela. Name of the witness, George F. Gorman, 25 years old, married, 1 child. His education, 2.5 years of college in mechanical engineering and physics. His rank, 2nd lieutenant with the North Dakota Air National Guard. He's 2 years with the National Guard at the date of this interrogation. Evaluation of person interrogated, according to Major Kubela. 2nd Lieutenant Gorman did not make the impression of being a dreamer. He reads little and only serious literature. He spends 90% of his free time hunting and fishing, drinks less than moderately, smokes normally, and does not use drugs. He appears to be a sincere and serious individual who has considerably puzzled by his experience and made no attempt to blow his story up. Summary of the interrogation. Lieutenant Gorman had been with his squadron on a cross-country flight. When the squadron returned at approximately 20-30 hours, Lieutenant Gorman decided to remain in the air inasmuch as he wanted to do some night flying. He circled the football field in Fargo. He saw about 500 feet below him a Piper Cub. He called the tower to find out if all was clear and was told that 1 other ship was in the air, the Piper Cub, which was flown by Dr. Cannon of Fargo, North Dakota. As he flew into the pattern preparatory to landing, what seemed to be the tail light of another airplane passed him from the right. He called the tower immediately and complained that they had misinformed him, that there was a 3rd ship in the air. The tower came back with the information that no other aircraft was reported out. They had just checked with all other airfields in the area. Lieutenant Gorman, seeing the tail light run just outside the Piper Cub, pulled up and cut towards the moving light in order to identify what he thought to be another aircraft. He saw the Piper Cub plainly outlined beneath him, but saw no outline of anything around the moving light. Lieutenant Gorman then proceeded to move toward the object. The light was clear white, completely round without fuzz at the edges, and was until then blinking on and off. He then proceeded to follow the light, which suddenly became steady and pulled into a sharp left bank, making what he thought to be a pass at the tower. Lieutenant Gorman dived after the light. He was unable to catch up with the object, which began to gain altitude. Lieutenant Gorman continued to follow the object, in the meantime calling the tower and advising them as to what was going on. The object continued gaining altitude and again made a left bank. Lieutenant Gorman then cut his F-51 to a sharp turn and tried to cut the object off in the turn. By the time he was to an altitude of 7,000 feet, the object then made a sharp right turn, and Lieutenant Gorman turned about and headed straight at the object, which had completed its turn and was coming toward him. At the point where collision seemed imminent, Lieutenant Gorman got scared and went into a dive. The object again made a left circle approximately 1,000 feet above him, and he again gave chase. He cut again sharply toward the object, which was once more coming at him. And at the time when collision seemed imminent again, the object went straight into the air, and he started climbing after it until he gained approximately 14,000 feet, at which time his plane went into a power stall. The object then turned in a northwest northern heading and disappeared. This was at 21:27 hours. Lieutenant Gorman proceeded to return to the field, being so excited that he had to make 2 passes at the field before he could properly land. During these entire maneuvers, Lieutenant Gorman noticed no deviation on his instruments. His magnetic compass reacted normally. There was no interference with his radio. He heard no sounds, noticed no odor, and saw no exhaust trails. This whole dogfight lasted 27 minutes. Now, this summary was signed by Major Paul Kubala of the United States Air Force. Now, let's move on to our second witness, Lloyd D. Jensen. This interrogation is dated October 4th, 1948. The interrogation officer is Major Paul Kubala. The person being interrogated, name, L.D. Jensen, 28 years old, occupation, airport traffic controller. And he's married with 1 child, education, 2 years in college. Evaluation of person interrogated. Mr. Jensen is exactly what his name implies. Typical, quiet, steady, Scandinavian type of individual. He seems very reliable, deliberate, and calculated in his observations. He is sober, does not smoke, use drugs, nor have any habits which could affect his normal way of thinking. Now, you can get the full summary of the interrogation on the episode page. We'll link to it because it's on NICAP. So here's just some highlights from it. Mr. Jensen was on duty October 1st, 1948 in the air traffic control tower as the traffic controller. There was not much traffic during the evening hours on that day, and with the exception of the F-51, there was no other plane from Fargo airfield in the air. At 20:50 hours, he was advised from a privately owned field of south of Fargo that Piper Cub number 707, piloted by Dr. Cannon, had taken off and had asked for permission to land at Fargo airfield to attend the ball game. At 2100 hours, Lieutenant Gorman called the tower asking if any other aircraft were in the air, and he was given the position of the Piper Cub. 5 minutes after that, Lieutenant Gorman called again and stated that there was another aircraft in the air at approximately the same altitude as the Cub. However, it could not be the Cub in view of its speed. He was advised that no other aircraft was in the air from Fargo airfield, and none other was signaled from other airfields. Lieutenant Gorman then called in again and stated that he was going to follow the other aircraft. Mr. Jensen then stepped to the south window of the tower and at that moment saw the object approximately 1,000 feet from the tower in a northwestern direction, passing very fast over the field. Mr. Jensen happened to have a pair of binoculars in his hand, and he watched the object as it passed over the field. He was unable to distinguish any shape or form other than what appeared to be the tail light of a very fast-moving craft. He saw the object only once, and then only as it passed in a straight line over the field. Mr. Jensen states that approximately 10 minutes prior to Lieutenant Gorman's call, the weather station at Fargo had released a lighted weather balloon. However, the balloon was at all times in sight by Mr. Sanderson of the weather station, the balloon flying slowly in a westerly direction at an altitude of about 500 feet. Mr. Jensen further states that the voice of Lieutenant Gorman became at times very garbled, and he had repeatedly asked him to speak clearer. He thinks, however, that during the diving and climbing maneuvers of the F-51, Lieutenant Gorman's throat microphone had probably slipped. Mr. Jensen heard no sound from the object, noticed no odor, and saw no exhaust streaks in the air. Signed, Paul Kubala, Major, U.S. Air Force. So here's Jensen's official statement stated by a voice actor.
October 1st, 1948. Attention, Major D. Jones. This is to advise that I sighted an object or a light traveling at a high rate of speed through binoculars with an F-51 following. The object passed between my position and the city, traveling at a high rate of speed apparently on a southwest heading. The F-51 was some distance behind, and the object was traveling fast enough to increase the spacing between itself and the fighter. This took place at approximately 9:10 p.m. on October 1, 1948. The object appeared to be only a round light perfectly formed, with no fuzzy edges or rays leaving its body. The edges were clear-cut. No other shape was observed. The main identifying characteristics was the high rate of speed at which it was apparently traveling. Sincerely, Lloyd D. Jensen, Senior Airport Traffic Controller. Civil Aeronautics Administration.
All right, so let's move on to the next witness, Manuel Johnson. This interrogation took place on October 4th, 1948. Interrogation officer, Major Paul Cabela. Name of the person interrogated, Manuel E. Johnson. 34 years old, married, no children, high school graduate. Occupation, assistant airport traffic controller, Fargo Airport. Evaluation of person interrogated. Mr. Johnson is approximately of the same type as Mr. Jensen. Stoic, quiet, Scandinavian type, not easily impressed, smokes pipe only, has never used habit-forming drugs. Summary of interrogation. Mr. Johnson was on duty at the Fargo National Airport, October 1st, 1948, and was in the tower at the time the F-51 called in requesting information about local traffic. At the time when Lieutenant Gorman called the second time in regard to the object, Mr. Johnson walked to the rear of the receiver and, looking out of the same window, saw the object and the cub. Object at this particular time was a little higher than the Piper Cub and outside of him. Object seemed to be on a north heading and then turned northwest. Mr. Johnson had no other information to offer in support of what Mr. Jensen had to say. He added, however, that Dr. Cannon and partner had, in the meantime, landed and come to the tower, and that Dr. Cannon had walked onto the balcony of the tower and remained on the southeast corner watching the object. Mr. Johnson heard no sound from the object, noticed no odor, and saw no exhaust streaks. Signed, Paul Cabela, Major, U.S. Air Force. Now, here's Johnson's official statement, stated by a voice actor.
October 1st, 1948. Attention, Major D. Jones. The object in question was first noticed just east of the airport and appeared to be on a north heading. After passing to the east of the airport, it seemed to take up a northwest heading. The object seemed to be at about 2,000 feet and appeared to be traveling at quite an excessive speed compared to a Piper Cub that was east of the field at the time. No definite outline could be identified. Both objects were noticed at the same time. Sincerely, Manuel E. Johnson, Assistant Airport Traffic Controller. Civil Aeronautics Administration.
All right, here's the final documented witness on NICAP, Dr. Cannon. Date of the interrogation, October 4th, 1948, same as the others. Interrogation officer, Major Paul Cabela. Name of the person interrogated, Dr. L.N. Cannon. Age, 66 years. Occupation, oculist. Education, 6 years, medical college. And his marital status is he was a widower. Evaluation of person interrogated. The doctor, in spite of his age, appeared to be highly alert, quick-witted, and very capable. He took up flying 2 years ago and owns 2 aircraft today, flying them from the Fargo Flying Club, which is located south of Fargo. The doctor was not at all impressed with the occurrence of the night of October 1st and seemed to be of the impression that a Canadian jet airplane may have come over and played tag with Lieutenant Gorman. Summary of interrogation. At approximately 20-30 hours, Dr. Cannon had taken off from the South Airport of Fargo and had made several circles over the football field on the outskirts of the city. Watching the game going on as he proceeded to land, he noticed what appeared to be the tail light of another ship go at considerable speed in a westerly direction. Dr. Cannon landed his Piper Cub at the Fargo airport and proceeded to the tower, where he delivered some bottles of Coca-Cola to the tower operators. On his entrance, he overheard the running commentary between Lieutenant Gorman and Mr. Jensen. He stepped on the balcony and watched the maneuvers of the F-51 from the southeast corner of the tower. He did see the object from the tower twice. The object was again headed in a westerly direction, returning very shortly, going into a steep bank, and then disappearing in a northwestern by north direction. Dr. Cannon noticed no deviation on his instruments. He did not, however, watch his magnetic compass, inasmuch as he flies more by knowledge of terrain than by compass. Dr. Cannon thought at all times that the light he saw belonged to another airplane, most probably to a Canadian jet, some of which have come over at various times and buzzed the Fargo airfield. He did, however, notice that there was no sound from the object at any time, no odor, and no exhaust streaks in the sky. Signed, Paul Cabela, Major U.S. Air Force. All right, there was no official witness statement on NICAP's website that I saw for Dr. Cannon. So that's a wrap on the witness interrogation documents and statements. All right, so further thinking and research. What did all of these people see? It certainly wasn't a weather balloon. I mean, come on. All right, key factor number 2, the Gorman letter. This can be found on the NICAP website. We will provide a link to it on the Majestic Truth website episode page. On December 10th, 1948, Lieutenant George Gorman wrote a letter to Kenneth Arnold apologizing for not being able to discuss the UFO incident. He went through because he was under a threat of a court-martial for speaking about his dogfight with a UFO over Fargo, North Dakota. Now I have a voice actor here reading the context of the letter from Gorman to Arnold. Here it is.
Dear Mr. Arnold, I am sorry that I have been unable to answer your letters. However, I think that you can understand my position better when you know the facts. First of all, I am under the military control of the 10th Air Force, and they have issued direct orders concerning the disc or object. Second, the Air Material Command has issued orders classifying the information as secret. And this makes it a general court-martial to release any more information. The command has asked that my commanding officer and myself be court-martialed for releasing what information we did. I have General Ewards or some high officer to thank for refusing to carry it out. Third, the Counterintelligence Corps have asked that I turn over all information over to them. And I have no doubt the FBI will get around to sending a few letters too. The public relations officer released more than he should have, and now we are being given a rough time. And they can do it too. I have a normal amount of curiosity, and I have a lot of questions to ask, but then I had a lot of them answered that night. The rest of that I will have to wait until they get ready to answer them. One of these days, I will be out to Boise, Idaho, and will look you up and we can visit. I think that I can be out there just after the first of the year. I would enjoy hearing from you again, and I hope to see you soon. Sincerely, George F. Gorman.
All right, further thinking and research. Why was Lieutenant Gorman threatened with a court-martial if he spoke any more about the incident? If it was just a weather balloon, what would be the risk in talking about it? All right, key factor number 3. Statements from Major Donald Kehoe's book, The Flying Saucers Are Real. So there is some great information in Kehoe's book, which you can get on Amazon. He met with Gorman. Here's some quotes from his book. When I met George Gorman, I found him to be intelligent, cool-headed, and very firmly convinced of every detail in his story. I had learned something about his background. He had college training. During the war, he had been an Air Force instructor training French student pilots. In Fargo, his home, he had a good reputation not only for veracity, but as a businessman. Only 26, he was part owner of a construction company and also the Fargo representative for a hardware store chain. Even knowing all this, I found it hard at first to believe some of the dogfight details, but the ground observers confirmed them. It was about 9 o'clock in the evening, October 1st, 1948. Gorman, now an Air National Guard lieutenant, had been on a practice flight in an F-51 fighter. The other pilots on this practice patrol had already landed. Gorman had just been cleared by the airport operator in the Fargo airport tower when he saw a fast-moving light below his circling fighter. From his altitude, 4,500 feet, it appeared to be the tail light of a swiftly flying plane. As nearly as he could tell, it was 1,000 feet high, moving at about 250 miles per hour. Gorman called the tower to recheck his clearance. He was told the only other plane in the area was a Piper Cub. Gorman could see the Cub plainly outlined below him. There was a night football game going on, and the field was brightly lit. But the Cub was nowhere near the strange light. As the mystery light raced above the football field, Gorman noticed an odd phenomenon. Instead of seeing the silhouette of a plane, he saw no shape at all around the light. By contrast, he could see the Cub's outline clearly. Meantime, the airport traffic controller, L.D. Jensen, had also spotted the light. Concerned with the danger of collision, he said later that he too thought it was a plane's tail light. He trained his binoculars on it. Like Gorman, he was unable to distinguish a shape near the light. Neither could another man who was with him in the airport tower, a Fargo resident named Manuel Johnson. So as the dogfight ensues, we now have two other observers. Just about this time, two other witnesses, a private pilot and his passenger, saw the fast-moving light. The pilot was Dr. Cannon, an oculist. His passenger was Einar Nelson. Dr. Cannon later told investigators the light was moving at high speed. After landing at the airport, Dr. Cannon and Mr. Nelson again watched the light, saw it change direction, and disappear. Something else I wanted to note from Kehoe's book. A letter in the book came from someone by the name of Art Green. He says, I'm summarizing, Dr. Kehoe, when you get to Fargo, ask Gorman what they found when they checked his ship with a Geiger counter. If it says it was negative, then he must be under orders. I happen to know better. Yours, Art Green. Further thinking and research, what did Art Green mean by what did they find when they checked his ship with a Geiger counter? Now, I looked at the reports from the field investigation documents on NICAP, and I'm not sure what the heck I'm looking at as far as the reading. But based on Art Green's statement, if it wasn't accurate readings presented, what are we to think? All right, key factor number 4, the weather balloon theory. Now, many have claimed the Gorman dogfight was simply a dogfight between a fighter pilot and a weather balloon, which I'm sorry seems quite laughable to me. I think a trained fighter pilot is going to know the difference between a balloon and another flying craft in the sky. Just saying. Now, an article written by Brad Sparks called Gorman's Tiny Balloon Was Black, Not White, Thus Invisible at Night, explodes half-century of debunking. Here are some excerpts from it. The weather balloon that debunkers have long claimed Lieutenant George Gorman fought with, which they insinuated was a gigantic floodlit white balloon, was in fact a black rubber balloon 2 feet in diameter, which could not possibly have been seen at night when Gorman's UFO encounter in his F-51 fighter took place over Fargo, North Dakota on October 1st, 1948. The tracking data establishes that the balloon was always 2 to 3 miles higher than Gorman's F-51 and even higher than the UFO too, meaning the balloon and UFO could not possibly have been one and the same object. Gorman could not possibly have seen the balloon or candle from 2 to 3 miles with the naked eye. He had no binoculars inside his fighter plane and never got close to the balloon, even conceivably within a 2 to 3 mile altitude difference. At the start of Gorman's pursuit, the UFO was at 1,000 feet. Gorman was at 4,000 feet. And the black balloon was at 14,000 feet. Thus, the black balloon was 10,000 feet higher than Gorman, and hence at least the distance of 2+ miles away from him in slant range. Gorman could not possibly have been positioned above the balloon at any time, and so high that he could see it silhouetted against the ground. Moreover, Gorman chased the UFO out to 25 miles southeast of Fargo while flying at 300 to 400 miles per hour, a fact never mentioned and which shows that Gorman did not dogfight a slow-moving balloon in circles in the Fargo vicinity. Plus, balloons cannot fly at 400 miles per hour. These balloons were launched every 6 hours by the U.S. Weather Bureau at Fargo's Hector Field. Why didn't the control tower and the other Gorman case UFO witnesses notice they were seeing the same thing if what they had seen was only the periodic weather balloon, not a UFO? Every day, every week, every month, every year, these same 6 hourly weather balloons, or larger and or light-colored ones, were launched from Fargo, including when Project Sign UFO investigators visited repeatedly to investigate in October of 1948. Why didn't someone notice these weather balloons looked like the Gorman UFO if they did? Because they did not. And again, Gorman chased the UFO at 300 to 400 miles per hour in his F-51 out to 25 miles southeast of Fargo. Again, unpowered balloons cannot fly at 400 miles per hour. Brilliant points, Mr. Sparks, and a fascinating read. We'll link to all this at majestictruth.com/episode 11. All right, further thinking and research. Mr. Sparks did a lot of research here on the balloon theory, and his points cannot be ignored. Okay, now that we've gone through the key factors of the case, I wanted to check out some newspaper articles from that time. This newspaper article is from the Boston Sunday Globe. Sunday, October 3rd, 1948. Headline reads, Flying Disc Returns Stunts in Dark with North Dakota Pilot. And it reads, a National Guard fighter pilot today told a story of a 30-minute encounter with a mysterious flying object over the city in the darkness, and his account was supported by 2 control tower operators and another flyer. In a signed statement for Air Force Intelligence, the pilot, Lieutenant George Gorman of the 178th Fighter Squadron, North Dakota Air National Guard, claimed he chased and did aerial maneuvers last night with a lighted disc-like object, which outran and outmaneuvered him. Yeah, it's definitely a weather balloon, right? Watching him and the object with binoculars were Lloyd Jensen and H.E. Johnson, both of Fargo control tower operators at Hector Airport here. Both said in statements today no other aircraft had reported to the towers besides Gorman's F-51 fighter and a Cub, whose pilot, Dr. Cannon of Fargo, also reported watching Gorman and the object dogfight around Fargo. Gorman said he first caught sight of the lighted object between his ship and the city's lights at about 4,500 feet. The F-51 pilot said he attempted to intercept the object, making head-on passes, but that it outturned and outran him for nearly a half hour until he lost it at 17,000 feet. Gorman said his speed at various times throughout the engagement ranged from 270 to 400 miles an hour. All 4 men identified the object as a round light, perfectly formed with no rays leaving its body, and traveling at a speed considerably faster than the F-51. And how about this article from the Minneapolis Sunday Tribune, also from Sunday, October 3rd, 1948. Headline reads, Whirling Object Speeds Away from Fargo Pilot. Fargo, North Dakota, a mysterious whirling object that outsped a P-51 Mustang in an encounter over Hector Airport at Fargo was described Saturday in an official report to Air Force Intelligence. 2 control tower operators and another flyer confirmed testimony of Lieutenant George Gorman, who piloted the Mustang Friday night when the lighted disc-like object came into his flight zone. Lieutenant Gorman, member of the 178th Fighter Squadron, North Dakota National Guard, said he chased and did aerial maneuvers with the object until it outmaneuvered and outsped him. Watching Gorman's strange encounter with binoculars were Lloyd Jensen and H.E. Johnson, both of Fargo, who were working in the control tower. I didn't see much of it, Jensen said, but I wouldn't call it a flying saucer from the description I've read of flying saucers. At first, we thought it was the taillight of an aircraft, until in a single quick burst of speed, it walked away from the Mustang. Jensen said the missile seemed to be traveling horizontally in a west by southwest direction. Dr. Cannon, Fargo, who was cruising over the airport in a Piper Cub, also witnessed the Gorman's futile chase. Gorman said he first caught sight of the object between his ship and the city's lights at about 4,500 feet. Gorman said he made head-on passes in an attempt to intercept the object, but that it outturned and outran him for nearly half an hour till he lost sight of it at 17,000 feet. Gorman said his own speed at various times throughout the engagement ranged from 270 to 400 miles per hour. All 4 witnesses described the object as a round light, perfectly formed. They said it had no rays leaving its body, and all admitted amazement over its speed. I've never seen anything like it, Gorman said. If anyone else had reported such a thing, I would have thought he was crazy. Gorman turned in his report to Major D.C. Jones, commanding officer of the 178th Squadron, who refused to comment on the matter. And just 2 more headlines. One from the St. Louis Globe-Democrat. Pilot tells of long dogfight with queer flying object. And the other headline from the Knoxville Journal. Flying ball plays tag with pilot. Mysterious object deliberately chased at 400 miles per hour. Interesting stuff here. Now, something else I wanted to note here because I thought about it. And when I read this, I was like, darn it, man. It would have been awesome if the exchange between Lieutenant Gorman and the air traffic control tower was recorded, but unfortunately it wasn't. Quote from one of the declassified documents states, "Since the CAA control tower at Hector Airport has no recording device, no copy of the conversation between the control tower and Lieutenant Gorman is obtainable." Too bad, right? All right, as we wrap up this episode, dear listeners, I invite you to ponder the implications of the Gorman Dogfight UFO incident. Was it an extraterrestrial visitation, a top secret military experiment, or something else entirely? The truth remains shrouded in mystery. What are your thoughts? Send them my way to truth@majestictruth.com. I'd love to hear from you. All right, truth seekers, that concludes this episode of Majestic Truth. I hope you've enjoyed exploring the depths of the unknown with us today. Remember, the pursuit of truth and the quest for knowledge are ongoing journeys. So stay curious, stay open-minded, always follow your dreams, and keep seeking answers. Next week, we are covering breaking chains, human trafficking awareness and prevention. This topic demands our attention and action. We'll discuss the importance of awareness and explore strategies for prevention. Human trafficking is a global crisis that affects millions of people, and it often happens right under our noses. Prevention starts with education. We need to teach our communities how to recognize the signs of trafficking and how to report suspicious activities. Additionally, we must advocate for policies that protect vulnerable populations. So tune in next Tuesday. You won't want to miss it. For more information on this episode about the Gorman Dogfight, visit majestictruth.com/episode 11. And if you have your own theories or stories to share about UFOs and other conspiracies, reach out to me on social media or email me at truth@majestictruth.com. Thanks for joining me, Truth Seekers. I'm grateful for every listener and humbled by every subscriber. Don't forget to mark your calendars and set your alarms because our next episode will be available next Tuesday on your favorite podcast app. Trust us, you won't want to miss it. Until then, keep your eyes on the skies, your mind open, and remember, the truth is out there.
For updates, behind-the-scenes content, and a chance to engage with fellow truth seekers, stay connected with us on social media. Find us on Twitter at TruthSeekerPod, Instagram at Majestic Truth Seekers, and TikTok at Majestic Truth Seekers. Tune in next week for our episode on human trafficking awareness and prevention. Thanks for listening.